He rescued the shivering dragon hatchlings. Now they cling to him and refuse to let go. Part 1. The frozen moon of Velrath 7 was the coldest place Kyle Brennan had ever been. The wind cut through everything. Even his thick thermal suit could barely keep him warm. Snow came down so hard that he could only see a few feet in front of his face. Kyle was a salvage pilot for the Galactic Survey Corps. His job was simple. He flew to places where ships had crashed, and he looked for survivors or valuable equipment. Most of the time, he found nothing but broken metal and empty rooms. But today would be different. His small ship, the Starling, had picked up a distress signal from somewhere on this frozen moon. Command thought it was probably an old freighter that got caught in one of the moon's famous magnetic storms. They could pull a ship right out of the sky. Kyle walked through the snow for almost an hour before he found the crash site. But when he got there, he stopped and stared. This was not a freighter. The wreckage was made of something that looked like crystal. The broken pieces sparkled even in the gray light of the blizzard. He had only seen material like this in pictures. This was a Draconari ship. The Draconari were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They looked like dragons from old Earth stories. They had scales and wings and could breathe fire. But they wanted nothing to do with humans or any other young species. They kept to themselves. Nobody really knew much about them. Kyle moved through the wreckage carefully. The crystal walls had been torn apart by the crash. Everything was covered in ice and snow. Then he found them. 2 adult Draconari lay in what used to be the center of the ship. They were huge, even bigger than he had imagined. Their scales were a deep red color, but now they looked dull and gray. They were not moving. Kyle did not need to check to know they were dead. The cold had taken them. But even in death, they were protecting something. Their massive bodies were wrapped around a small chamber in the middle of the room. Kyle had to climb over one of them to see what was inside. It was a nest. 3 small creatures lay huddled together in a pile of blankets. They were baby Draconari, each one no bigger than a large cat. Their scales, which should have been bright and shiny, were dull and lifeless. Their eyes were closed. They were not moving. Kyle felt his heart sink. He was too late. The parents had died trying to keep their babies warm, but the cold had been too strong. He reached out with one gloved hand to touch them. He wanted to say goodbye, even though they could not hear him. Then one of them moved. It was just a small movement, a tiny twitch. But Kyle saw it clearly. He touched another one, and it moved too. The smallest one opened its eyes. They were gold, like liquid fire, and they looked up at Kyle with something that could only be fear and hope mixed together. The baby dragon made a sound. It was soft and weak, almost like a kitten crying for its mother. They were alive, barely alive, but still breathing. Kyle did not think. He did not have time to think. He unzipped his thermal suit and pulled all 3 of the small creatures inside. He pressed them against his chest, against his bare skin, giving them the only heat he had. The cold hit him like a hammer. Without his suit fully sealed, the frozen air rushed in and racked around him. His body started shaking immediately. But he could feel the baby dragons against his chest. They were so cold, like ice against his skin. But they were moving now, pressing closer to him, seeking his warmth. Kyle started running. The way back to his ship was long. The snow made every step difficult. The cold was getting into his bones. He could feel his fingers going numb, his toes losing feeling. But he kept going. He could feel the small creatures pressing against him, their little claws digging into his undershirt, their cold noses pushing against his heartbeat. He talked to them the whole way. He did not know if they could understand him. He did not know if they could even hear him. But he talked anyway. "It's okay. I've got you. You're going to be okay. Just hold on. We're almost there. Just a little bit more. Stay with me. Please stay with me. 20 minutes. That was how long it took to reach the Starling. It was the longest 20 minutes of Kyle's life. He burst through the airlock and immediately turned the internal heating to maximum. The warm air hit him like a wave. He fell to his knees on the floor of his ship, still holding the 3 baby dragons against his chest. They had stopped shivering. For one terrible moment, Kyle thought he had failed. But then he felt them moving, pressing even closer to him, their small wings wrapping around his body like tiny blankets. He tried to put them down. He had prepared a heated blanket on the floor. It would be warm and soft and safe. But the moment he tried to move them, they screamed. It was a high, piercing sound that made his ears ring. All 3 of them started crying and clawing at his chest, fighting to stay close to him. The smallest one looked up at him with those golden eyes, and Kyle could see pure terror in them. He tried again, same result. The screaming was even worse this time. After 5 attempts, Kyle gave up. He sat down in the pilot's chair with 3 baby dragons clinging to his body. Their small wings were pressed against his ribs. Their heads were tucked under his chin. They were not letting go. Kyle looked down at them for a long moment. He had no idea what he was supposed to do. He was a salvage pilot, not a caregiver. He knew nothing about Dragonari. He knew nothing about raising babies of any kind. But right now, 3 small creatures were holding on to him like he was the only safe thing in the universe. And maybe for them, he was. He opened a communication channel to Galactic Command. "This is Lieutenant Brennan," he said, his voice tired but steady. "I have a situation." On his chest, the smallest dragon let out a soft purring sound and closed its golden eyes. For the first time since the crash, it looked peaceful. Kyle did not know it yet, but his life had just changed forever. He rescued the shivering dragon hatchlings. Now they cling to him and refuse to let go. Part 5. 5 years had passed since that day on the frozen moon. 5 years since Kyle had pressed 3 dying babies against his chest and run through a blizzard to save them. 5 years since his whole life had changed. Kyle stood on the observation deck of Orbital Station Kepler and watched his children fly. They were not babies anymore. They were magnificent. Ember had grown into a powerful dragon. Her scales blazed with inner fire, glowing red and orange like a sunset made of flames. Her wingspan was almost 20 meters across. She flew through the darkness of space like she owned it, twisting and turning with incredible grace. She was fierce and protective, always the first to investigate any danger, always the first to defend her family. Smoke had become quieter as he grew, more thoughtful. His scales were dark gray, almost black, and they let him blend into shadows so well that sometimes even Kyle lost track of him. But his mind was brilliant. He spent hours studying human engineering and Dragonari history with equal fascination. Last month, he had proposed an improvement to their ship engines that made the human scientists scratch their heads in amazement. And Spark, sweet loving Spark, had grown into the most beautiful of the 3. Her scales shimmered with every color imaginable, changing depending on her mood and the light. She was bigger than a small shuttle now, but she still climbed into Kyle's lap when she needed comfort. Her purr had become a song that people across the station loved to hear. They still called him father, not always with words, but always with their hearts. They spoke to him through their bond, sending feelings and images and pure emotion. And even though they were huge now, even though they could destroy a ship with a single breath, they still came back to him at the end of every day. They still needed him, and he still needed them. "Dad!" Ember's voice echoed in Kyle's mind. She was excited about something. "Come look! Smoke found something interesting in the asteroid field." Kyle smiled and put on his spacesuit. Even after 5 years, going outside to see what his children had discovered was one of his favorite things. He found them near a cluster of large rocks, about a kilometer from the station. Smoke was examining something on the surface of one asteroid. Spark was floating nearby, her scales reflecting the distant stars. Ember circled above them, like a guardian angel made of fire. "What did you find?" Kyle asked through his suit's communication system. Smoke pointed with one massive claw. There, hidden in a crack in the rock, was a small flower. Nothing could grow in space, but there it was, a tiny purple bloom surviving against all odds. "It's like you, Dad," Spark said, her voice warm in his mind. "Small but strong, growing where nothing should be able to grow." Kyle felt tears forming in his eyes. His children saw him that way, a survivor, someone who grew in impossible places. "Let's bring it back to the station," he said. "We can find a place for it in the garden." As they flew back together, Kyle thought about how much had changed. He was no longer just a salvage pilot. He had become something else entirely. He was an ambassador between humans and Draconari, a symbol of what was possible when people chose love over fear. His relationship with the dragons had changed everything. For the first time in history, humans were not just the young species that everyone ignored. Kyle's adoption of the Verithan children had proven something important. Love was not limited by biology. Family was not just about sharing blood. The warmth of a single human heart could change the course of history. They landed on the station's external platform. Kyle's suit was tiny compared to his children, but they were always careful around him. They moved with gentle precision, never forgetting how fragile their human father was. "Incoming message from Earth," the station's computer announced. "It's from your mother." Kyle laughed. His human parents had taken time to adjust to having dragon grandchildren, but his mother had accepted them completely. Last month, Spark had visited Earth for the first time. She had spent 3 days curled around Kyle's childhood home, while his mother fed her apple pie through an open window. "Put her through, Mom." "Kyle, honey, I'm sending more of that pie Spark liked. Make sure she shares with her brother and sister this time." Through their bond, Kyle felt Spark's immediate interest. She loved his mother's cooking. Without being told, she started flying back toward the cargo bay, where supply ships arrived. Some things never changed. Commander Holt appeared next to Kyle as he walked back inside. She had gray in her hair now, but she was still in charge of the station. "The Draconari Council sent another message," she said. "They want to meet with you. They're talking about building a permanent embassy on Earth." "That's wonderful news." "There's more." Holt paused, her expression becoming serious. "There's been another crash, another nest. The elders think you might be the only one who can help." Kyle stopped walking. "More babies?" "3 of them. Same situation as before. Parents didn't survive. The babies are young and scared, and they need someone." Before Kyle could answer, he felt his children reach out through their bond. Ember was radiating determination. Smoke was sending calculations about how they could help. And Spark was already filled with excitement about the possibility of having younger siblings. They knew, they understood, and they were ready. Kyle looked up through the transparent ceiling at his 3 dragons. They were huge now, powerful and magnificent, but in his mind, he could still see them as they had been that first night. Small and scared, pressing against his chest, seeking his warmth. He had saved them because it was the right thing to do. He had raised them because they needed him. And somewhere along the way he had become something more than just a salvage pilot from Earth. He had become a father, a bridge between worlds, a proof that love could overcome any barrier. "Tell them yes," Kyle said. "Tell them we're ready." Outside, his 3 dragons roared their approval. The sound echoed across the station like a promise. Like hope. like the beginning of something even more wonderful than before. Kyle smiled and went to prepare. There were more children out there who needed saving, more scared little hearts that needed warmth, more impossible families waiting to be formed. And Kyle Brennan, father of dragons, was ready for all of them. The end. 3 days passed. Henry fell into a new routine. Every morning he woke before sunrise, checked on his bees, and then spent the rest of the day caring for his strange visitors. He cleaned their wounds with warm water and wrapped their torn wings in soft bandages. He brought them bucket after bucket of honey, which seemed to be the only food that gave them strength. Kira and Sol grew a little stronger each day. They began to move around the barn, stretching their legs and testing their wings. Sol was quieter than his sister, often sitting in the corner and staring at nothing. But Kira watched everything with sharp, curious eyes. She asked Henry questions about the farm, about the bees, about the world outside. "Your planet," she said one evening as Henry changed her bandages. "What do you call it?" "Earth," Henry replied. "We call it Earth." "Earth," Kira repeated. "It is beautiful here. The air is clean. The sky is blue." She paused. "Our sky was purple. 2 suns made it purple." Henry set down the bandages and sat on his usual hay bale. "Will you tell me about your home?" Kira was quiet for a long time. Saul lifted his head and looked at his sister. Something passed between them again, that silent communication. Then Kira nodded slowly. "Our world was called Verath 7, she began. "It was the 7th planet around our star. Our people, the Varathi, had lived there for thousands of years. We built cities that floated in the sky. We grew forests that glowed with light. Our oceans were warm and purple, and creatures swam there that sang songs you could hear from the shore." Henry listened without interrupting. He could hear the love in her voice when she spoke of her home. "We were peaceful," Kira continued. "We did not fight wars. We did not build weapons. We spent our time learning, creating, caring for our world. Our parents were scientists. They studied the stars and the space between them. They wanted to understand the universe." "Your parents," Henry said gently. "Where are they now?" Sol made a sound like a wounded animal. He buried his face in his claws. Kira's golden eyes filled with tears that did not fall. "They are gone," she whispered. "Everyone is gone." The story came out slowly, painfully, over the next few hours. Henry learned about the Harvesters, a machine intelligence that had existed for millions of years. No one knew who had built them or why. They moved through the galaxy like a plague, finding worlds with life and consuming them. They took everything, organic matter, water, minerals, and left nothing behind but dead rock floating in empty space. The Harvesters had come to Verath 7 without warning. One day, the sky was purple and peaceful. The next day, it was black with ships. Millions of ships, each one filled with machines that felt no mercy and knew no fear. Our people tried to fight. Her voice was hollow now, empty of emotion. But we had no weapons. We had never needed them. The Harvesters broke through our defenses in hours. They began taking everything, the oceans, the forests, the people. She stopped and took a shaky breath. Our parents worked in a research station near the northern mountains. When the attack began, they knew there was no hope of winning. So they did the only thing they could do. They put us in an escape pod. It was small, meant for emergencies. They programmed it to find the farthest safe world the sensors could reach. "Earth," Henry said. "Earth," Kira confirmed. We did not know anything about this place. We did not know if anyone would help us, or if we would be killed on sight. But our parents said we had to try. They said we had to live. They said we had to remember. Saul finally spoke, his voice raw and broken. They stayed behind. They stayed to fight. to give us time to escape. He looked up at Henry with those golden eyes. We watched through the window as we flew away. We watched the fires. We heard their last thoughts. Henry felt his heart breaking. He thought of his own children, grown now and living in distant cities. He thought of what he would do to save them, what any parent would do. "What did they say?" he asked quietly, in their last thoughts. Kira closed her eyes. "They said, live, remember, find kindness." The barn was silent, except for the soft sounds of the night outside. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. The bees were sleeping in their hives. The world kept turning, indifferent to the tragedy that had unfolded on a planet so far away. "How long ago?" Henry asked. 40 days, Kira said. 40 days since we left. But our pod was damaged during the journey. When we entered your atmosphere, we lost control. We crashed in the wilderness, far from here. We have been walking ever since, hiding during the day, moving at night. We did not know if your people would help us or hurt us. Why did you come to me? Soul answered this time. We smelled the honey. It reminded us of home, and we were so tired, so hungry, we could not run anymore. Henry stood up slowly. His old bones ached, but he ignored them. He walked over to where the two young Varathi lay and knelt down beside them. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "I do not know much about space, or aliens, or machines that eat worlds. I am just an old man who keeps bees, but I know one thing for certain. You are safe here. I will not let anyone hurt you. I will not let anyone take you away. Do you understand?" Kira looked at him with wonder in her eyes. "Why? You do not know us. We are strangers. We are not even the same species." Henry smiled sadly. "Because your parents told you to find kindness. And kindness is not something you save only for people who look like you. Kindness is something you give to anyone who needs it." Saul moved forward and pressed his head against Henry's chest. After a moment, Kira did the same. Henry wrapped his arms around them both, these impossible children from a dead world, and held them as they finally let themselves cry. Outside, the stars shone coldly in the Montana sky. Somewhere out there, the harvesters were still moving, still consuming, still destroying. But in this small barn, on this quiet farm, two orphans had found something they thought they had lost forever. They had found hope. And Henry Caldwell, who had thought his life was nearly over, discovered that it was just beginning a new chapter. A chapter he never could have imagined. A chapter that would change everything. He rescued the shivering dragon hatchlings. Now they cling to him and refuse to let go. Part 3. 42 days after Kyle rescued the baby dragons, everything changed. It started with alarms. Red lights flashed across every corridor of Orbital Station Kepler. Warning sirens screamed from every speaker. Kyle was in his quarters, playing with the dragons, when the emergency broadcast came through. "All personnel, be advised. Unknown vessel has entered local space. This is not a drill. All non-essential personnel, report to evacuation zones immediately." Kyle grabbed his jacket and put the dragons inside it, close to his chest where they liked to be. Then he ran toward the command center. He needed to know what was happening. When he got there, he stopped and stared at the view screen. A ship had appeared out of nowhere. But this was not like any ship Kyle had ever seen. It was massive, bigger than the entire station. It was made of the same crystal material as the crashed ship on Velrath 7. The whole thing glowed with an inner light that seemed almost alive. It was a Draconari vessel. Commander Holt was giving orders rapidly. "Get all civilian personnel to the escape shuttles. Contact Galactic Command. I want answers now." She turned and saw Kyle standing there, with the dragons on his chest. Her face became serious. "Lieutenant, you need to leave. Get on an evacuation shuttle right now." "But what's happening? Why are they here?" Before Holt could answer, the view screen flickered. A new image appeared, and Kyle felt his blood turn cold. The Draconari on the screen was enormous. Even through the view screen, Kyle could feel the power coming from her. Her scales shimmered like captured starlight. Her eyes were ancient, filled with thousands of years of wisdom and judgment. When she spoke, her voice did not come through the speakers. It came directly into everyone's mind. "I am Matriarch Selendrith of the Draconari High Clutch. You have something that belongs to us." Against Kyle's chest, the baby dragons reacted immediately. Ember pressed closer to him. Smoke wrapped his tail around Kyle's wrist so tight it almost hurt. Spark started making a small crying sound. They were afraid. Kyle could feel their terror through their bond. They were more scared than they had been since the night of the crash. Commander Holt tried to explain. She told the matriarch about the crash, about the frozen moon, about Kyle finding the babies near their dead parents. She offered to cooperate. She suggested they could talk about returning the dragons peacefully. The matriarch listened without any expression on her face. Then she spoke again. "The hatchlings will be returned to us immediately. The human who took them will be evaluated for his crimes." "Crimes?" Kyle stepped forward before anyone could stop him. He was holding his dragons protectively, his arms wrapped around them. "What crimes? I saved them. They were dying. Their parents were already dead. I saved their lives." The matriarch's ancient eyes focused on him. Kyle felt her gaze like a heavy weight pressing against his mind. It was like standing in front of a mountain that was looking at you. "You are the one," she said slowly. "You are the one they have bonded with." "Yes. Then you have committed the most serious offense possible against our kind. You have stolen children. You have corrupted them with your alien biology. You have made them dependent on a lesser species." Kyle felt something hot rise up inside him. It was anger, protective anger, the same kind of anger a parent feels when someone threatens their children. His voice was firm and clear. "I found them freezing to death next to their dead parents. I kept them warm with my own body. I kept them alive. And I have spent the last 6 weeks feeding them, taking care of them, and doing everything I could to help them grow strong." He opened his jacket and showed the 3 dragons. They were pressed against his chest, their eyes wide with fear. But they were beautiful. Their scales glowed with healthy light. Their wings were strong. They had grown so much since that terrible night on the frozen moon. "Look at them," Kyle said. "They are not corrupted. They are healthy. They are strong. They are loved." Then he noticed something. The dragons were not looking at him. They were looking at the view screen, at the matriarch, and they were terrified. "They are afraid of you," Kyle said quietly. "Not me. You." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Finally, the matriarch spoke again. "You will bring the hatchlings to our vessel. We will decide their fate according to our ancient laws. We will also decide your fate. And if I refuse, then we will take them by force, and your station will be destroyed as punishment for sheltering a thief." Kyle looked at Commander Holt. He looked at the massive ship on the view screen. He thought about all the people on this station, all the innocent lives that would be lost if he refused. But he also thought about Ember, Smoke, and Spark. He thought about their nightmares. He thought about how they trusted him completely. He thought about the promise he had made to keep them safe. He made his decision. "Fine," he said. "I will come to your ship, but the dragons stay with me. They go where I go. If you want to separate us, you will have to kill me first." Through their bond, Kyle felt the dragons react to his words. Their fear was still there, but now there was something else too. Trust. Love. Commander Holt stepped forward. "Lieutenant, you can't do this. We can find another way." There is no other way, Kyle said, and I am not leaving them. They need me. He looked down at his dragons one more time. Ember was staring up at him with fierce determination in her golden eyes. Smoke had stopped hiding for once, his head lifted high. Spark was still pressed against his heart, but her purring had returned, soft and steady. They believed in him. They trusted him to protect them. Kyle would not let them down. "Get me a shuttle," he said. "I'm going to their ship." An hour later, Kyle walked alone into the transport bay. A small shuttle was waiting for him. Through the window, he could see the massive Drakenari vessel, floating in space, like a mountain made of stars. He did not know what would happen when he got there. He did not know if he would survive. But he knew one thing for certain. He would fight for his dragons with everything he had, no matter what it cost him. He rescued the shivering dragon hatchlings. Now they cling to him and refuse to let go. Part 4, Age 2. The inside of the Drakenari ship was like nothing Kyle had ever seen. The walls were made of living crystal that glowed with soft light. The hallways stretched in directions that did not make sense. Everything was huge, built for creatures much larger than humans. Kyle walked through these ancient corridors with his head held high. His 3 dragons were clinging to his chest under his jacket, their hearts beating fast against his own. 2 Drakenari guards walked beside him. They were young, probably only a few hundred years old, but they were still twice the size of any creature Kyle had met before. Their scales were dark blue, like the deep ocean, and their eyes watched Kyle with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. The ceiling was so high that Kyle could barely see it. The walls were covered with carvings that told stories going back thousands of years. And at the far end of the room, 7 ancient Drakenari sat in a half-circle, waiting. These were the elders. They made Matriarch Selendrith look young. Their scales were faded with age, marked with countless scars and symbols. Their eyes held depths of wisdom that Kyle could not begin to understand. "This is the human," one of them said. His voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. "This is the thief." "He is the rescuer," another elder countered. Her voice was softer, but no less powerful. "The one who saved the last children of the Varathan bloodline from death." Kyle filed that information away. The Varathan bloodline. His dragons came from an important family. They had a heritage, a history, a place in Drakenari society. "Bring him forward," Matriarch Selendrith commanded. Kyle walked toward the elders. He could feel his dragons trembling against his chest. Through their bond, he felt their terror. They had never been in the presence of so many adult Drakenari. The psychic pressure was overwhelming for them. Kyle sent them a feeling of comfort through their bond. It was like wrapping them in a warm blanket made of emotion. "I'm here. You're safe. I won't let anything happen to you." The trial began. For hours, the elders debated in a language Kyle could not understand. Their minds touched his, pulling out memories without asking permission. They saw everything: the crash site, the frozen bodies of the parents, the desperate run through the blizzard, the weeks of feeding and caring and loving. It felt like being turned inside out. Kyle hated it, but he did not fight. He opened himself completely. He let them see everything. He let them feel what he felt for Ember, Smoke, and Spark. Then something unexpected happened. The dragons spoke. They were too young for words. Baby Drakenari could not form proper sentences until they were at least a year old. But they could communicate through emotions and images. And now, they were using their bond with Kyle to send those emotions and images to the entire council. They showed the elders the crash, the terrible sounds of metal breaking, the screams of their parents, the cold that came after, so cold it felt like death itself. They showed Kyle's arrival, a strange creature, different from anything they had ever seen, but warm, so wonderfully warm, and his voice, saying the same words over and over. "I've got you. You're going to be okay." They showed the journey through the snow, the fear that they would not make it, but also the hope, because this strange creature was holding them so tight, running so fast, refusing to give up. They showed the weeks that followed, Kyle learning to feed them, Kyle learning to understand them, Kyle singing human songs when they could not sleep, Kyle holding them close during the nightmares, keeping the cold away. They showed love, pure, simple, undeniable love. When they finished, the chamber was completely silent. The elders did not move, they did not speak. They simply sat there, processing what they had just experienced. Finally, Matriarch Selendrith rose from her seat. She moved toward Kyle slowly, each step making the floor shake. She was so large that Kyle had to bend his head all the way back to see her face. "In all our long history," she said, "no Draconari young has ever bonded with an alien species. We believed it was impossible. Our biology is too different. Our minds are not compatible. And yet these three children, the last of the noble Verithan line, have bonded with a human." She paused, looking down at Kyle and the three small faces peeking out from his jacket. "Our laws are clear," she continued. "A bonded parent and child cannot be separated. The parent is responsible for the children until they reach maturity. These laws were written for our own kind, but the laws make no exception for species." Kyle felt something spark in his chest. Was she saying what he thought she was saying? "You, Kyle Brennan of the human species, are hereby recognized as the legal guardian of Ember, Smoke, and Spark of the Verithan bloodline." The words hit Kyle like a wave. He could not believe what he was hearing. "You will raise them as your own," Selendrith continued. "The Draconari people will provide support and resources. You will teach them about their human father's world. We will teach them about their Draconari heritage. And when they reach maturity, they will choose their own path." "What if they choose to stay with me?" Kyle asked. His voice was shaking. "Then they will remain with you, and you will be considered a friend of the Draconari forever." Kyle looked down at his dragons. Ember was staring up at him with fierce pride burning in her eyes. Smoke had finally stopped hiding, his head held high for the first time since they arrived. Spark was purring so loudly that the sound filled the entire chamber. Through their bond, Kyle felt their joy. It was like sunshine breaking through clouds after a storm. "I will do it," Kyle said. His voice was stronger now, filled with certainty. "I will raise them. I will protect them. I will love them for as long as I live." "Yes," Matriarch Selendrith said, and for the first time, Kyle heard something warm in her ancient voice, something that might have been respect. "We know you will." She turned to address the full council. "Let it be recorded in our histories. On this day, a human became father to 3 Draconari. On this day, the walls between our species became a little less tall. On this day, we learned that love does not care about biology." The elders bowed their massive heads in agreement. Kyle stood in the center of that ancient chamber, surrounded by creatures older and more powerful than anything humanity had ever encountered. But he did not feel small. He felt strong. He was a father now, and nothing in the galaxy would ever change that.